Today we have a crazy revenge story that leads to somebody taking money from loan sharks. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, Aunt's new husband is a pervert, so I get him arrested. My Aunt Lisa, 41-year-old female, has never been the luckiest when it comes to relationships. I think it has something to do with the kind of guys she dated. She had always been attracted to the bad boys. I can still remember all the Thanksgiving dinners when she'd come over with her new guy, and my mom will give her crap for her terrible taste in men. Those dinners usually ended in a fight with Aunt Lisa storming out of the house and slamming the door. Seriously, Thanksgiving never felt complete if she didn't storm out of the house and slam the door closed. Aunt Lisa used to be very cool. She loved me like a daughter, and being a successful realtor, she was very rich, so she showered me with gifts whenever she came around. I loved having her around because she was younger than my mom, and I could talk to her about anything. When I was 9, she got married and had her first divorce, all in the span of 1 year. She caught her husband cheating on her in her bedroom. I saw the terrible things that divorce did to her. She got the house, but she sold it and came to live with us for a while. She'd stay in the guest room all day and cry her eyes out. The only time she'd come out of her room was when she had a prospective client to attend to. She'd come out of the room all dressed in her power suit, looking sharp like she wasn't just crying in the shower less than 30 minutes ago. She lived with us for close to 1 year before she got an apartment in the city. She got married again 2 years after her first divorce, and even this one didn't last 4 years. He told her he was a hedge fund manager, but surprisingly, he lied about everything. After that experience, she said she was done with relationships and wanted to build her real estate empire. Obviously, this wasn't true, because just a year after her second divorce, she started seeing someone new. When she told my mom, she got mad. They had a fight about Aunt Lisa's inability to follow through with anything that wasn't work-related. This back and forth went on for quite a while, but eventually, Mom backed off. She came to Thanksgiving dinner with her new boyfriend. Let us call him Alex, 45-year-old male. And for the first time, he wasn't a bum like her usual type. Everyone was surprised by this development, my mom especially. For the first time, our own Aunt Lisa is actually dating someone responsible. He was actually one of her clients, and they met while he came to look at an apartment. He had a stable job, he dressed responsibly, and talked like he actually graduated high school. We all liked Alex and couldn't be more excited when she announced that they were getting married. I finished high school at the age of 17, and because I wasn't going to be 18 by August, I decided to take a gap year before going to college. I told Aunt Lisa about it, and she invited me to come over and stay with her. Since I was going to college to study business, she offered to take me on as an intern and give me first-hand knowledge of how her business worked. I had always looked up to her since the beginning. I loved the fact that she built her business from the ground up and without any help from any guy. It was admirable. The crazy part is that she didn't even go to college like my mom. She started her business right out of high school. All I wanted was to be like her. So when she made the offer, I said yes immediately. I knew my life was going to change. I just didn't know how. I moved to her place in the city. A sharp contrast to the suburbs I've lived in my entire life. We got to work immediately and I loved every moment of it. Aunt Lisa took me around the city to the properties she had for lease or sale, and I helped her do the proper documentation. I attended to clients whenever she wasn't around, and I was starting to get the hang of it. The only times I couldn't go with her was when she had a client out of the state. She preferred to go alone because the travel and meetings were usually stressful. In times like that, I had to stay home. Alex also worked from home, and us being alone would give me a chance to get to know him better. I got my wish, I just didn't like what I found. The day Aunt Lisa traveled for a job, Alex and I were at home and I was in the living room watching movies. He came in and sat on the same couch with me, asking what I was watching. We started talking about the movie, and along the line, I realized that he was shifting closer to me. I didn't want to make it awkward, so I didn't say anything, but eventually he got so close that our thighs were touching. I was wearing bum shorts and a top, so I got really uncomfortable with this closeness. I tried to move away, but he placed his palm on my thigh. I slapped his hand off and stood up from the seat. He apologized immediately, saying he wanted to grab a throw pillow and he didn't realize how close I was to him. His excuses just sounded like he was blaming me. I didn't know what to make of the whole situation. I even started to delude myself into thinking that maybe he was right and I was overthinking things. I let it slide that day, and when Aunt Lisa got back the next day, I didn't tell her what happened. I decided to keep it to myself because I didn't want to come in between their relationship. Alex was a good guy. He was responsible, he went to church, and everyone liked him. How on earth could he have touched me intentionally? This was what I told myself. The weeks passed and everything was normal. I even started to believe that maybe he was telling the truth after all and it was all in my head. But not for long. Aunt Lisa had another appointment with one of her out-of-state clients, and I was home alone with Alex. This time, I decided not to come out of my room. I stayed in and read a book, but that didn't stop him. Alex walked into my room without permission and asked me to come and do the dishes in the kitchen. I obeyed and went to clear out the sink. I thought Alex had gone to his room because I didn't see him follow me to the kitchen. I was so engrossed in the dishes I was doing that I didn't notice when he walked up behind me. He held my waist and pulled me to him. I yelled and pulled away, running out of the kitchen. Alex laughed at me and said that he was just playing and that I freaked out too easily. What the heck does that even mean? He was harassing me, and he called it a joke. What kind of joke is that? I wanted to return home that day and stay with my parents, but they had finally taken that vacation they'd always wanted to take, and they wouldn't let me stay home alone. Besides, going back home would mean me traveling interstate, and they wouldn't let me do that except if I was driven by an adult. Alex was out of the picture, so I had to wait until Aunt Lisa came home. For the rest of the week when she was away from home, I stayed in my room. I made sure to do all my chores early and take my food up to my room, locking myself in. Whenever he came to knock, I'd answer from behind the door without opening it. Even when he apologized for his behavior, I stayed adamant. Finally, Aunt Lisa got back home and I went to see her. After she settled in, I talked to her about Alex's advances. She listened to me quietly and didn't even react as I dropped the bomb on her. When I was done, she merely said she was sorry for his behavior and that she'd talk to him. What the heck? I told her that her husband assaulted me and her answer was that she was going to talk to him? In what world does that make it okay? I tried to explain further because it was possible that she didn't get the full scope of my complaint, but her answer remained the same. That was when it dawned on me that she wasn't surprised because she knew. She knew that he was a pervert and she still married him and let me stay home alone with him. I confronted her, and she didn't deny it. She apologized once again and said that she didn't expect that he'd try to harass me too, since we were family. I asked her why she stayed with him when she knew who he was, and she said he was the best she could find. He wasn't abusive or toxic, and he treated her well. She couldn't take one more failed marriage. On one hand, I understood what she was facing. She had never had a successful relationship, and this was the closest she had ever gotten. If she lets this one go, there's no assurance that she'll do better. But on the other hand, Alex's pervasion is also hurting her. She couldn't tell me that she didn't care about the fact that he tried to SA me. I only wondered about how many others he had tried it too. There was only one way to work it out, and if Aunt Lisa didn't have the courage to do the right thing, I'd help her. I never complained about Alex again. It helped that he never came close to me when Aunt Lisa was around, but a few weeks later, she traveled again, and I started to work on my plan. I got an allowance from Aunt Lisa, and I'd been saving for a while. After she left, I went to a hardware store and bought some spy cameras. I placed one in the kitchen, the other in the room, and one in the living room. They were strategically placed and could capture everything happening in the room. After that, I went about my daily routine and waited for him to fall into my trap. I didn't have to wait long. Just 3 days after Aunt Lisa left, Alex walked up to me in the living room and asked me if I liked to dance. I said no, but he didn't seem to care about my answer. He pulled me up from the chair and pushed me against him, trying to force me to dance with him. I resisted, but he didn't care. Soon enough, he started to touch me and I pushed him off before running away into my room. I locked myself in and checked my phone for the video. It was clear enough and showed his face. That same day, I went to the nearest police station and submitted the video to them. When they examined the video, they came over to the house and arrested Alex. Aunt Lisa and my parents were called and charges were filed against Alex. My mom blamed Aunt Lisa for her wrong choices in men once more, and they had a final falling out. The trial is still ongoing, but Aunt Lisa doesn't talk to me or my mom anymore. I know she might hate me for what I did, but it's for the best, and she'll realize it sooner or later. 100,000% somebody like this, even just for OP's own safety, was for the best what they did. Anybody is living in absolute denial if they cannot see that. Like, I'm sure Aunt Lisa's just bitter about it, but they fully understand why it happened. Our next story is, I made my boyfriend serve time for cheating on me. I got to find out in the most painful way possible that I was the side piece of my boyfriend, whom I had trusted for quite some time. This is not something I would do upon any person, not even someone I quite literally hate. But then, it happened to me. And just to put this out there, I didn't take things lying down, as I got my revenge in one of the pettiest ways possible, and till this day, I don't regret my actions, not one single bit. My boyfriend, male 26, and I, female 20, were quite literally what you would call two peas in a pod. We were inseparable in our relationship, as the level of understanding between the both of us was quite incomparable when placed side by side with other couples. There is quite literally nothing we don't talk about. Nothing. We made sure that no topic was off the table, and the concept or the idea of keeping secrets between ourselves was non-existent. However, even this was not enough to keep my boyfriend to myself, as there's usually a popular saying that goes, you can't keep a relationship with someone that doesn't want to be kept in one, and I guess this was the case for me. My story begins not too far back, basically when I'd met my boyfriend, well, now ex-boyfriend, so to say, back in college. He was quite an introvert, as I usually made fun of him by teasing him and telling him how much of an introvert he was, and also how it came about to be that I was the one that actually asked him to be my boyfriend, as he was taking his sweet time. Anyways, we both met way back then on our very first encounter. It was almost like your typical love story, where the guy would bump into the girl or vice versa, and then fall all the books she has on hand, and then while he was trying to help her get them, their hands would meet, and then their eyes would lock in, which would then result in a moment of silence and all that. This was practically what happened, but the only difference was that there were no books first off, and also I was the one that bumped into him, and while he was apologizing, I was also staring deep into his eyes, just mesmerized by the person before me. He has the most amazing facial features I had ever seen in a person, and I mean this honestly. He was so attractive that I don't even remember asking him for his number right then and there. And then when he looked at me, trying to figure out what was going on and why all of a sudden I was asking his phone number and all, I quickly tried to play it off by saying that I just wanted to properly apologize later on, and that was how I got to have a means of engaging in proper conversation with him. I didn't want to make it seem like I would be the one texting him first, so what I did was, I gave him my number, and then I told him to text me if he wanted to. It really seemed like a desperate move at the time, but this was the best I could have come up with the way things had already played out, and surprisingly, he did text me, that very evening even, and then we got to talking. Our initial conversation was basically myself trying to apologize for the prior incident and all, and then afterwards, as the conversation between the both of us completely went to a whole different dimension, as I had initially thought of him in a whole different way, but he had greatly surpassed my primary view on him. Well, for starters, he had this needy look and feel to his person, and I can't lie, that was attractive for me too. But then, upon getting to know and converse with him over the course of a few weeks, almost a whole month, I got to see the other side of his character, but not in a bad way. He was really naughty. He had quite literally a whole different personality from when I met him prior to our conversation, and this was majorly limited to our conversations on the phone. But I kind of liked it. It really made talking to him all the more fun, and I got attached way too quickly, which is something I've been trying to work on for quite a while now, and I think I'm making steady progress. Anyways, my now ex-boyfriend and I, at the time, hadn't realized the feelings we both had for each other fully. But there was a situation, or rather an occurrence in this case, that made things really come into the light between the both of us, and this was when he brought it to my attention that there was someone else that was trying to get his attention and all. And although at the time we weren't anything just yet, I just felt the sudden urge to flare up and react. And this wasn't something I should have done, or rather reacted to, but then it just felt like it at the time, and this really made things interesting between the both of us, as I was feeling threatened by the presence of another lady trying to get all up close and personal in his life. After this incident, or scenario, I thought long and hard what it was that I wanted from him, and what I thought he wanted in return. And after coming to no definite conclusion, I figured it was best to inquire directly from the person involved. And one thing led to another. I happened to have asked him out, all while confessing my feelings for him in the middle of the whole conversation. And to my greatest surprise, he also felt the same way, as he also confessed his feelings for me. And apparently he'd been harboring these feelings from the very day we had met, or so he had told me. After that day, we were finally official, and I quite literally had this sense of relief that I had him to myself. However, this was just the beginning of one of the worst relationships I had ever been in my entire life. I would like to start from the very beginning of the end of everything. However, at the time, I had not the faintest idea what I'd gotten myself into. So all of this was still happening while we were still in high school, by the way, and there was nothing short of drama in the entire time where we were in our relationship. But the one drama that would eventually lead to the end of everything we had together was when he introduced me to his bestie. And this was right after we had both just gotten out of a heated argument with each other, of which I can't quite remember what the argument was about. But one thing I do know was that it was so heated that we didn't speak to each other for the whole day. And then I decided to be the bigger person in that situation and just call him to order so that we can have an adult conversation about things. And right after we met up and had talked things out, that was when he deemed it fit to inform me about his so-called bestie, whom he claimed had been his best friend for quite a while now, and that there was nothing going on between the both of them, as she apparently had a man who was on the verge of putting the ring on her finger. I don't know if he said that to make me feel better about the fact that he just told me that he had a bestie almost immediately after we had a very heated argument, but I decided to play it off, as I didn't want it to seem like I was out looking to start another fight or argument right then and there. Things went on really fine between the both of us from that moment on, surprisingly, and then this was when my mind began feeling uneasy, as I was already getting some weird thoughts, and these thoughts were triggered by some of his recently acquired or learned behaviors, which included, not excluding, increased secrecy, mostly with his phone, and conversation history, which didn't seem to be a problem before, the lack of motivation to want to see me anymore, which he blamed on his academic schedule and all, and I totally bought that, and last but not the least, the sudden ick he had developed to kissing me. This was the height of it. I couldn't understand where all of these behaviors and actions had come from, but there was one thing I was most certain of, and that was the fact that he had clearly changed and not in a good way. I had to get to the root of everything, and I most definitely preferred direct confrontations and all, but every time I tried that, he always found a way to squirm out of the conversation. And then I took it upon myself to investigate myself. After a not-so-thorough investigation, I found out that there was indeed something going on between himself and his bestie, whom he claimed he had nothing to do with. But I hadn't gotten enough to fully justify my findings, and I sought to catch them red-handed, as this would be evident enough for me, and this wasn't hard at all. This particular day, while we were in our final year in college, he told me that his dorm was having an all-boys exclusive party, and that he was going to be gone for the night and also unavailable too. I knew this was my chance, and so I did not object to the fact that he had just lied straight to my face and all. Anyways, right after he left for the party, he made an obvious pit stop at an Airbnb which he had gotten in town, and I knew this because I'd already made preparations to track his phone and all. When I noticed that he'd gotten settled, a few hours later, I got up and left for his location. And to no surprise at all, I caught them together, leaving to get something to eat, and when I asked him what was going on, the flustered look on his face told me all that I needed to know. He tried explaining himself, but I wasn't ready to listen to all that, as I stormed out of the scene and went home immediately. I was heartbroken, quite literally, and this was because I truly loved him and I thought he did me too. I guess it was just all lies from the very beginning. He tried to contact me multiple times after that day, trying to explain himself and all, and after I'd gotten tired of avoiding him, I felt like I couldn't leave things as they were. I had to get my payback one way or the other, and so I decided to take him up on his offer, just as a means to think of something that would hurt as much as what he had done. He was genuinely surprised that I would accept him back after what he had done, but little did he know that I had something else planned to do to him. Things weren't looking so good the first week after I'd accepted him back, and I wasn't seeing any clear opportunity to get back at him. That was until I realized that we were both in our final year in college, and for our research paper, We were told to avoid plagiarizing our work, as it had severe punishments and all. I don't know how, but I got the ingenious idea of making his entire research paper totally plagiarized. And this was easy, because I had easy access to his working PC. Long story short, he submitted his work, and he was summoned by the school's panel, and he was told to dance to the tune of his music. He was given half the initial time. But the fact that he was given jail time for something he had no idea about was what gave me the most satisfaction. And also, the look on his face through all of these was priceless. Okay, I get like getting half the time and whatnot. I get like even being kicked out of school, being told straight up, you're not going to graduate. But did OP say that this guy got jail time for plagiarizing? Is that a thing that can happen someplace in the world? Maybe not the United States. Is it? This next story is how I extorted my ex and caused him to take money from loan sharks. Some years back, at a time when I'd started to think that there was no one out there for me, I met someone. I figured I was destined to be alone and die alone. I was starting to accept that and learn to live with it when I met my ex. A fine man. He was good looking, he knew it and he milked it. His face was perfectly crafted by God. He had all the physical qualities that any woman would desire in a man, even white dentition, a sharp jawline, and beautiful hair. He was also tall and had the most beautiful eyes. Don't even get me started on the voice. I owned a small restaurant just around the corner. It was passed on to me by my grandmother, who was a superb cook, and passed that talent on to me as well. I met my ex while working in my restaurant that day. It was a busy evening, which was unusual because my restaurant was located in a small corner of the city. One of my staff told me that a customer wanted to personally thank the chef, so I stepped out from the kitchen all sweaty and hot, excited to be praised. The customer was seated with my ex. He thanked me for the meal and I thanked him for stopping by. He then asked if I'd like to cater to a small party he wanted to organize for his wife. He was sure that his wife and their guests would like my meals. I thanked him for the offer and asked that we talk about it the next day. Despite being very tired that evening, I couldn't help noticing the cutie that sat next to the man. He was just too handsome. Somehow, silly me winked at him and he stared at me in surprise. I'm a plus-size woman. All my life, people have advised me to lose weight, assuring me that the minute I did that, I'd have men falling all over me. I had this friend who would say, "You already have a sterling personality, you just need to look good." I hardly ever had guys ask me out as a kid, and even the men who looked at me as a teenager were perverted older men who must have sensed how starved of male attention I was at the time. One benefit of not even being on boys' radar was that I could flirt shamelessly without them without thinking too much about it. So when I winked at the cutie, I didn't expect him to take it seriously. The next day, I met with a man who wanted me to cater for his party, and he came along with the cute guy. It turned out that the cute guy worked for my client. I agreed to cater for the party and made good money from it. I didn't even think too much about the cutie, I just knew that I'd met a cute guy. One evening, while my staff cleaned up the restaurant kitchen, I heard someone trying to come into the restaurant. "Sorry, we're closed," I yelled, rolling my eyes and wondering if they didn't see the closed sign that I hung on the door. The person came in anyway, and it was Mr. Cute. I was surprised. Anyway, he said he couldn't stop thinking about me and wanted to ask me out on a date. Listen, before that night, I could not remember when a guy walked up to me to ask me out. I also couldn't remember when a guy who looked half that good walked up to even say anything at all. I, who is usually all confident and outspoken, became shy and self-conscious. I agreed to go out with him, but that night, I started to have second thoughts. Many thoughts ran through my mind. What if he wanted to use me for something? I had too many what-ifs on my mind. I was so bothered by this that I had to call my friend right in the middle of the night. She assured me that it was all in my head and that he probably liked something about me to have walked up to me. I thanked her and went on the date the next day. For the months that followed, the cutie and I went on several dates. We got to know each other, and it was at that point that I found out that he was illegal in the country. Even his boss had no idea that he wasn't licensed to work in the country. That should have been a red flag. But my ex had successfully love-bombed me. He came into my life and showed me the kind of love that no man ever had. The kind of love I'd dreamt about but never actually thought I'd get. It was beautiful, and I was crazy about and addicted to him, addicted to the attention that other people paid me whenever I was out with him. Some women even looked at us with pure envy, as though they were wondering how someone that good looking would want to be with me. I was going to tell my friend that he wasn't documented, but I feared that something would happen in the future and she would rat him out. I've had a friend betray me before, and trusting another friend with a secret of that magnitude wasn't something I could do. I wish I had asked my friend though, but if I had and she wanted me to be more careful around my ex, I would have never have believed her. When she met him, she made me promise to never let him break my heart. I promised and thanked her. When my ex mentioned that he was illegal, after months of us being together, I suspected that he'd ask me to marry him shortly after. I waited for it to happen so I could tell myself that that was all he wanted from the start, and that a man that good looking could never want a woman like me. But that didn't happen. We kept dating. Whenever he wasn't somewhere with his boss, he was always at my house or in the restaurant with me. He'd even help me out in the kitchen, and I'd watch the girls who work for me watch him in admiration, probably wishing they had a man like that. I loved that, and my man was so open about his love for me that I got it everywhere. Wherever he went, people stared. My brother was genuinely surprised. He had told me when I was in culinary school that I had to lose weight if I wanted to find love. My friend was happy for me too. Outside of our relationship, it was as though my ex did not have a life. He was always in my house, my restaurant, or hanging out with my friends. I had no complaints though, to be honest. All that made me feel secure in our relationship. After dating for a while, I started to wonder if my ex loved me enough to marry me. Yes, I knew he was my boyfriend and that he loved me, but I started to wonder if he'd marry me. I've been with guys who were willing to love me, but only as a secret. I started to wonder if my ex would love me enough to get married. And then I started to bring up marriage. There was no resistance whatsoever. He said he'd love for us to get married and said it would happen when the time was right. Some weeks after we had the marriage conversation, he asked if I'd marry him. There was no engagement ring though. He said he was saving up to buy me the perfect wedding ring, and I thought that was cute. I couldn't tell my friends and family that though, so I went out to the ring shop and bought myself an engagement ring. Something to show off to my friends, brother, and employees. We didn't have an engagement party, but decided to move in together and start planning our wedding. I didn't want him to move in with me because I figured that would make him feel emasculated since everyone knew I owned the place. I had to rent a new place for us to move in. I paid the rent myself and furnished the house. He didn't make as much as I was making, so it made sense to me to take care of us. We moved in together, and I kept paying our bills. Again, I thought having us live together would compromise the quality of the love he showed me, but that wasn't the case at all. My ex stayed consistent in his love for me, and we started to prepare for our wedding. I became very sure that he loved me, and for the first time since we started dating, I relaxed. 2 weeks into our wedding, I found out about why he approached me in the first place. My ex said he was going to ask to take the day off from work. He had a busy day at work the day before and needed to rest. I had a lazy day as well, but I decided to go to the restaurant to at least prepare breakfast and leave. I left the restaurant early and returned home earlier than usual. Our apartment's door was locked, so I just used my key and got in. I wanted to sneak up on my ex and all that, but as I drew closer to the bedroom, I heard him on a phone call. I eavesdropped on this conversation, and that was how I found out that my ex had been lying to me. Our entire relationship was a big lie. I heard him telling someone that he only had to be married to me for a maximum of 6 months. He even said if he could impregnate me, that would be better for him. I had to tiptoe back to the door and then started calling him from the living room so he knew I was around and didn't suspect that I'd been listening to his conversation. After I heard all that, I woke up one night and went through his phone one night and read his conversations. It turned out that my ex had a girlfriend in his home country. He also had a plan B, a person he would marry if I backed out. He was also going to pay her a huge sum of money, and that is why he's been penny pinching. He figured it was cheaper to get me to marry instead of the other girl, so I was the first option. He also told his girlfriend that I was the cheaper option. He told her that he was going to buy me a wedding ring, and that was all he'd spend on our wedding. Yes, he typed the wedding in quotation marks. I was beyond hurt, but I was too scared to discontinue our wedding. I wondered what people would say. I had already made our relationship my entire identity. Everyone was looking forward to it. I couldn't afford to lose him and the marriage. After many weeks of pretending we were fine and lying that I was exhausted from all the wedding planning whenever it seemed like my ex was catching on, I decided on a revenge that would make sense and benefit me at the time. I was going to extort my ex. A day before our wedding, I let him know that I was onto him, threatened to rat him out, and demanded a huge sum of money. If he refuses, I'll tell them that I know that I knew he was going to make some other arrangement and that I will rat him out still. I did just that, and he was shocked to the bones. He was confident and thought he had me right where he wanted me to be. When he saw how serious I was, he tried to beg me and said too many things, but I was smarter. I did not believe a word he said. I got back at him by taking all his money, even made him borrow money from a loan shark. I married him though, but I made a crapload of money from it. So I'm assuming this guy, when he was there as an immigrant, probably for even like a period of year or two, maybe, he was probably working wherever he could and was just saving all of that up as much as possible. I mean, OP said that they were constantly around OP, so that was probably their way of getting around having to pay for like rent. Probably was a nice decent sum that OP could just scoop up for themselves. I guess you don't have to go to the revenge of trying to get them deported if they just gave you all this money. I guess you just ride it out and hopefully have a no contest cheapest divorce you can possibly get. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.